Last week we started talking about the second I in going deeper with God, which was to intentionally engage with God. And I've had a couple people come up to me and just ask, what's the difference of just kind of going to church? Because last week I said something, maybe it was a little bit harsh, I guess, that, if all you did was go to church, then you weren't really intentionally engaging with God. And I do want to say that if it is a spiritual practice to go to church, and if you do that on a regular basis, then that's great. I mean, it's not a negative thing, and I wasn't trying to make it a negative thing. And sometimes, I live, a busy life and 3 kids and, do other things other than just preach on Sunday morning. And so I know that you can get busy in life and you don't really have in your mind the time to, maybe practice spirituality, get involved in a ministry or something like that. And you can, rely on church to be that one spiritual connection. I just believe that everybody, if they follow Jesus, is meant to go deeper than just those normal things that you can find time to do. I had a teacher when I was just really early on as a Christian who would always tell us this: you have 24 hours out of every day to do what you want. Don't let anybody lie to you about that. He'd always say that. Don't let people lie to you. You have 24 hours out of every day, and people would be smart alecks and say, well, what about the 8 hours you're supposed to sleep? And that would not be a good thing to say to this guy because he was really smart, but sleeping is we do because we want to. I mean, Albert Einstein was known for going off 3 hours of sleep every single day, and he changed the world in the way that we look at different, areas of science and things like that. And I'm not telling you not to sleep. I'm just telling you, if you don't believe that you have time, you're lying to yourself. And if you don't believe that you should be doing it, then you're lying to yourself. So I just kind of want to riff off an idea that I've just been mulling over for a while, and I'll go to the scriptures in a second. But there's this thing that is called, and I'm not going to have this up here because, again, I'm going off script a little bit, but there's a thing called are you guys ready for this? It's going to be some big words. The Plateau of latent potential. And here's what that means. In, layman's terms, and I'm a layman because, I had to, I read this in a book. It's not original with me. But the plateau of latent potential essentially is this. It's that time when, you're doing anything that is of value where it doesn't feel like it's making a difference. Like you go to the gym every day for 7 weeks, and then or not for 7 weeks, for 7 days, because, that's probably a stretch for anybody who doesn't work out all the time. But you go to the gym for 7 days, and then you come home, and you get on the scale, and you've lost a half a pound. And you're faced with that plateau, I just gave 7 days of my life, and I'm sore, and I've been eating rabbit food, and I only lost a half a pound. It doesn't seem worth it. So you're faced with that decision at that moment. Do I keep doing this because it's not making a huge difference in my happiness or reaching my goals or whatever it is that you're trying to do? Now, I would say that the biggest place in a believer's life for the plateau of latent potential is engaging with God. It's easy for us to set it on automatic and go to church every week. I mean, we act like it's a sacrifice, oh my gosh, I just want to have my Sunday and do my thing, But when it comes to things like prayer, we were having a conversation this morning, which really convicts me every time I think of this idea. But our great media team, and the reason why media wasn't working today is because one of them is not here, and I was the one that was supposed to do it, and I'm not a great media person. I'm not great at praying slow. I am not good at announcements. There's just certain things that are not my gift. I'm always competent enough to be dangerous, but when it's me, it messes everything up. That's a sidetrack. Sorry about that. But when people pray or do anything of value, there's that plateau of latent potential What I was going to say, we were talking about is our great media team made a slide last week that we didn't have, really easy on their phones. I don't know how these people are that creative and do these things, but for intercessory prayer. And I was telling Ruth, because Ruth is a prayer warrior that goes to intercessory prayer every single week. And she's like, yeah, if we could just get people to come, that would be a great, slide to show people. Like, I hope it makes people come. And it's generally 1 to 2 people that come to, intercessory prayer. And then, we were talking, Hermie and Zach, and she goes, hey, but you know what? I've been part of churches that are 500 or 600 people in it at intercessory prayer. It was still 1 to 2 people that would show up. Put on a potluck, put on a big ministry outreach, put on something that, seems like it has some, outward purpose in it. Everybody will be there. Say we're going to show up and be with God and we're going to pray for the needs of people in our church. People are like, that's the night that I, do this or that. When it comes to the things of God, the plateau of latent potential is always ever present. Because if we're not seeing, and especially in our culture, which is always wanting immediate expected results, if we're not seeing it, it's not worth doing. But see, the Bible says that we walk by faith, not by sight. Faith is one of those things where if we're going to put faith into something, it's like planting a seed and then watering it. And then, and that's a really healthy thing for any Christian to be involved in, is learning how to plant stuff, because that's how the spiritual life works. We sow into it, we take care of it, and God produces the growth that comes out of our life. And then it's like one of those crazy things. Like overnight, success begins to happen in your life, but it doesn't happen all at once. Like, I don't know if you've been a Christian for a long time, you haven't had this experience, you need to start seeking God more for it. But I've had these just times where I've broken out into, praise driving in my car because I recognized something in me had changed, but I didn't realize it had changed. It wasn't like a revelation. Oh, I'm no longer a drug addict. Or, it wasn't like something like that. It's just like I realized I no longer had a hang up or some thing. And I realized, man, that's proof God changed me and that the stuff that I'm doing is working, but it never feels like that when you're on your knees at 4 o'clock in the morning. It never feels like that when you show up to the meeting where there's only a couple people. It never feels like that when you go and try to reach people who are at that hotel and they are having some sort of seizure or demonic episode and nothing really got done and it wasn't a lot of fanfare attached to it. Nothing ever feels, and nothing worth doing ever feels immediately satisfying. I can tell you, we're going into our 11th year at this church, after summer, we'll be headed towards, year 11 and, it's super hard. And again, I'm off script. And so if I get emotional or if I share things that you think I probably should have kept to myself, I'm the one with the microphone. You don't have it. Who cares what you think? But that was funny. I do care what you think. But the thing is at one time, I felt like, the vision for New Wine was to be like this big downtown, cool, young adult church with art in the window and all that stuff. And when you got to be the one who shows up, no matter if you guys are on vacation or not, it's super dissatisfying, just so you guys know. This morning, I'm here and 5 people text me all at once. Hey, sorry, I'm not going to make it again this week. And I'm always, you guys know if you tell me that, I'm always really nice about it or anything like that. But I really wish you wouldn't give me regrets. I don't care if you come. I'm not checking attendance. I'm not making a list and checking it twice and trying to find out who's naughty or nice or what you're doing. I'm not the sin police. I don't care about last night. The reason I show up is for the people that come, but it can be so devastating because you get 5 regrets in a text message while I'm trying to prepare the message and, look for the people who do come. And it's just I feel that plateau of latent potential. I know what God is doing matters. I know being here matters. I know preaching matters. I was saying something along these lines maybe about a month ago, and he's not here this morning, which I kind of miss him, but this guy Paul comes up to me and he's like, are you seriously, do you feel like you're going to quit? He's like, don't quit. He's like, we need you. We need these things. And it's like, that really, strengthens when you hear that sort of thing, but it never feels good when you're in the midst of it. Kind of got cathartic there for a second. Sorry, don't feel bad. But do if you do. So the church is meant to go deeper with Jesus so that we can become the people he created us to be. And we do that by intentionally engaging with him on a regular basis. We begin to value the things that he does, live the life that he wants us to live, and put things into a proper perspective, which actually makes all the difference. But I feel like one of the most spiritual things that I can tell you is, while it's happening, you aren't going to see very many results. We are putting a deposit in the bank that's growing. I could think of 1,000 ways to explain this, but probably the best one, and you won't remember this, and I'll put it on Facebook or something, but the plateau of latent potential. One last illustration about that, and then I'll jump into the Bible for a second. Picture if this room was brought down to 28 degrees. If it was at 28 degrees, you could put an ice cube on the table and it's not going to melt. And then we sent somebody over to the thermostat and we had them turn up every hour 1 degree. Until we get to 32 degrees, nothing in that ice cube is going to change. But once we do get to 32 degrees, it's going to start to melt. So the only way to get that to work or to melt is to turn up the heat. Continue moving forward and persevering in whatever you're doing. Not giving up. Continuing, no matter how you feel, to pray every single morning is the only thing that is going to make the difference. It's getting, for those of you who are workout people, most of you guys all look great, so I assume you all work out. It's the days that you don't want to go to the gym that make the difference. You get in the reps. So that's just a little encouragement to you guys. Intentionally engaging with God is not going to be like, oh, I'm in the prayer closet and I feel the Shekinah glory coming down on me and it's, oh my gosh, I got to come back every morning to have that feeling or that experience. Those things come and I believe in them more than any of you. I speak in tongues more than anybody in this room. But those aren't the things that matter. You have to walk through the valley. You have to stay consistent. You have to put the reps in because you'll always be coming in and out of the plateau of the latent potential of your relationship with God. So don't give up. So I wanted to read a couple of things this morning that I believe go pretty well with the idea that there's more to this than just being somebody who comes to church on Sunday or believing something new or doing something good, that this is something special that Jesus calls us into. This relationship with God has meaning and potential, and if we stay consistent with it, you'll see in some of this right here that we are able to transcend who we are now and make a difference in the world that we would otherwise not be able to make without this relationship. So in Matthew 5:13 through 18, which is actually, 20, or is it 18 that I put? I'm just going to read a couple of these verses. I'll just go to verse 14. But in Matthew 5:13 and 14, which is part of the Bible reading guide today, Jesus says a pretty famous passage of scripture. He says, "You are the salt of the earth, but what good is salt if it's lost its flavor? Can you make it salty again? It will be thrown out and trampled underfoot as worthless. You're the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket. Instead, the lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father." He starts out by saying, you're the salt of the earth. But what good is salt if it's lost its flavor? Now, some people can argue salt is good because you can use it to melt ice and all kinds of other, different things. But what's crazy is, did you know that salt can't expire? It doesn't expire. It never expires. So a lot of people have criticized this, like saying Jesus was just wrong about that because salt can't lose its flavor. It actually can. It doesn't expire, but it can lose its flavor. Let me explain how. It can become contaminated. Salt loses its flavor because it changes its flavor based upon what touches it. Jesus is saying to his disciples, you guys, all of us who would receive their message from however we received it throughout time, that you, if you're a believer, if you're a follower of Jesus, you're the salt of the earth. You're the salt that God is seasoning the planet with. But he's saying, if you contaminate yourself with things that you're not supposed to contaminate yourself with, it changes your flavor. Now, a lot of you probably think that what I'm talking about is, drugs, sex, money, all of the typical, sins that, people contaminate themselves with. But let me just say this. I don't think that's what he's saying. He is talking about these disciples being people that are actually going to make a difference, are actually engaging with him, and he doesn't want them, because this critique, like I talked about last week when I read over those passages, is about the religion of its time. He is telling his disciples, you can lose your flavor if you give in to this lackadaisical, purely symbolic, purely tradition way of religion. He's telling them that, look, hey, if you do, you lose your flavor and you're not really worth anything. I mean, that's a pretty harsh statement, but it's Jesus's, and I really am not allowed to improve upon his statements. You'll be thrown out and trampled. It's worthless. And then he uses the other illustration in this passage. You're the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. I mean, he says, no one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but they place it in a place where everybody can see. I mean, these two things, salt and light, are important illustrations, because the only way that salt can get messed up is it becomes contaminated, and the only way a light can't be seen is if you cover it up. Now, here's what happens in my opinion. People meet Jesus and they love him, or they're attracted to him in some way, or they grew up in church, or whatever your story or experience is. And they kind of get relaxed. They have that plateau of latent potential, and things don't seem to be getting any better, and there's no more that's come out of their relationship with God other than that they go to church and have friends and, have become a little bit more biblically literate. So they just kind of relax into what we call the sin of the Pharisees. They say the sin of the Pharisees is the greatest sin because they were doing the right things for the wrong reasons. Church becomes just simply beneficial because you got connections there. It becomes something that, you're doing that eases your conscience a little bit about the other things that you're doing in your life. And it just becomes blah. Instead of being the life-giving, point of contact and community for my relationship with God that I, intentionally engage in every single day. And so that we can, have some sort of opiate type, numbing that comes into our life. We keep religion and our ticket to heaven as the main thing that matters to us, and then we just give up on trying to have a deeper relationship with God. Jesus is saying you can't let these things, you can't let the flavor that comes from your life, you can't let the light that you shine be contaminated or burnt out because of just becoming lazy in your faith and not doing the things that God created you to do. Most people, when this happens to them, they become idolatrous in some way. They wouldn't call it idol. They wouldn't say that it's something that is a problem in their life. They would generally look at it as a benefit. For instance, a lot of people who are just strictly religious and they've hit the plateau and they don't try to relationally engage with Jesus anymore are the most political people that you'll run into. their religion becomes their politics. They, they're voting for this guy only. There's no way that they'd ever change that opinion. There's some issue, or maybe some like political issue in their life that they hold up as an idol. A lot of times when people are in recovery, sobriety can become their idol. It's no longer about their relationship with God and the thing that has made them be sober and keeps them sober. It's just about their success and how much clean time that they have. I mean, these things are not necessarily bad things, but they just become more like God and contaminate us. Make it to where people can't even approach us. I'm not going to ride that train anymore. Or like, for instance, and here's one that probably is going to get me some sort of email or something. A lot of times people like this will make the Bible their idol. The Holy Spirit is no longer in control. He can't interpret anything. They would get so enraged that they'd stand in a parking lot and yell at everybody. Because what has happened is they hit the plateau of latent potential, and now they feel like they're not moving forward anymore, and so they have to start doing things that, make them feel more spiritual or better, or, have some sort of purpose, because they don't feel like it's working with God, and they give up on it. We are called every single day to intentionally relate to God so that we don't end up making idols. We don't end up, missing out on what God has for us, so we can experience the vision that God has for our lives. I mean, look, I just kind of like bound by what the scripture I want to talk about and all the things I want to say in my heart. So I'm just gonna go with what I need to say, and then we'll wrap up in a few minutes. The best thing that you can do as a Christian, honestly, and it's really, I hate to say this, if you want to have a deeper relationship with God, you need to intentionally be okay with being bored. Sorry to say it. I get it. I hate it more than you. I'm going to tell a story, and I never ever say this person's name because I never want them to come up and beat me up afterwards or anything like that. But one of the most transformative things that I've seen happen in a person's life is there's a person in this room that has been with me for a really long time and always been like one of my best confidants, and I love them so much. But they were, when I first met them, the most antsy person I'd ever met in my whole life. They, they don't sit still very well. They're smarter than me, they're better than me, but they're go, 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 go. They're one of the most go, go, go people I've ever met in my life. And we were having a retreat, kind of like the one I hope we can have soon. And I did the worst thing that I could do to a person like this. I said, okay, everybody, here's what's going to happen. I've made this little workbook for you, and you're going to go off and you're going to go pray for just about an hour. And the person walked up to me, and I thought they were going to just give me a hug like they normally do and be nice to me. And they grabbed me by the arm and they said, I hate this. And they walked off. They were actually the first person to come back, too. It was probably about 30 minutes that they did. But that was really, progress for them. But over the years, I saw that, I hit a nerve. And so over the years, I always made sure when we had a retreat, a leadership type deal, I would do the same thing. And I would increase the time. I would be like, okay, now we're going to do 3 hours away. And over time, this person even, that I could tell that, they struggled with that sort of thing, just sitting alone in silence. Over time, it became something that was more easy to them, to the point where at one time, haven't checked in about it for, a couple, years, but at one time, they decided that they were going to do that every single week on their own. Now, why would that happen? How could you go from hating being alone in silence to choosing to be alone in silence? It's because you get the reps in, and it starts to make a difference, and you start to be able not to live without it, and it starts to be something that defines your life. Every single time you do it, it gives a vote for the type of person you are. And so what I say about Christians need to learn to be comfortable with being bored is that we are just like ridiculous. Like we're just trying to look for the next experience all the time. I mean, one of the craziest things, like, and you can tell somebody's contaminated and they're putting their light out is that like they will be the type of person that has to go to 7 church services a week. They've got to chase that, high, emotional high and go around and like, find the right worship setting or the pastor who says the things that make them feel convicted or something like that. I mean, they're missing the point in making an idol out of what's supposed to be good, but is not God. Here's what I mean by intentionally engaging with God. And I'll get more detailed into this as the weeks progress in this month, but we need to be the type of people that are strategizing and focusing on building habits of prayer, worship, giving, habits of doing ministry in our life. I mean, some of the people of this church, and some are not here today, where I just have you all stand up, but like, there's people in this church that are dedicated to ministry. I'm not talking about like I say they want to volunteer and help. They run the whole thing. It's beautiful. Like they are sending text messages. I don't even remember the stuff, and it's like I'm getting text messages. I'm the pastor. I'm getting text messages from them saying we're doing this and this and this and this way. And there's people who, all I'm saying is we will strategize about our jobs. We'll strategize about our future, our retirement savings, how much fun we're going to have, when we're going to take a vacation. How many times have you strategized about your spiritual life and what you need to be doing on a regular basis? Amen. I mean, it never happens with most people I talk to. They're like, yeah, I pray. I just do what you tell me to do, Pastor. What do you want me to do? Well, I mean, why not sit down and make some intentional statements? I will, at this time, on this day, do this thing. Like, I'll tell you this. I'll let you all off the hook. Don't pray for all of Lent. I dare you. Don't pray. Just one time in that 40 days, go away for 4 hours by yourself, no cell phone, and pray. That's the only time you have to pray during Lent. It'll change your life. And here's why I jumped to that, okay? I'm just a little bit sporadic today, but I jumped to that because, everybody says like, oh, well, I don't have time to pray in the morning or anything like that. I was like, forget praying in the morning. Would you commit to once a month going away for 4 hours and turning off your phone and not having anybody be able to get a hold of you, where you would just be alone and quiet with God? Some of you would probably say, no, I'll just pray every day. Forget it. Intentionally, or the word intention means that you are making a decision to do something. Engaging with God has to be a decision that you make that you're going to do this at this time and stay consistent. I promise. Okay, turn it, like, since Zach left, can you just like put some music in the background? It'll make me stop faster. I promise you this. You will run into the plateau of latent potential. But as the degree gets turned up, the ice will start to melt. And you will find yourself changed. The only explanation that could be, because you can't argue with my testimony, you can't argue with the testimony of people who have done what I'm saying. The only explanation would be is that if you did this for this amount of time and it started to make a difference, is that God started to change things. If you want to move the needle in your life, there's only one way to do it, and that's to intentionally start to engage. You can go to all the self-help seminars, read all the books you want, do all that stuff, change churches, go somewhere where you feel better and more accepted. There's a million different things that you could do. I promise you, if you're not intentionally engaging with God, none of it's going to make a difference. You can go to church for the rest of your life, and I'm sure you're going to go to heaven when you die. But if you want this to make a difference, then you have to intentionally do what God is calling you to do, which is, like I read a couple weeks ago, come to me, all of you who are weary and heavy laden. Take my yoke, his teaching. He's intentionally calling us into a relationship with him. And in order for any relationship to work, you've got to do your part.